may be seated. See, that's who Jesus came to, the lame, the cripple, the deaf, the mute, the dumb. You say, well, that's not me. I'm none of those people. Well, we're going to see who he reveals himself to this morning. And that is just, you are one of those. You think about the lame man at the pool of Bethesda, I believe it was. What was it, 38 years? It was a long time. Long time he's there. He's 38 years old. It was a long time he's been at this pool. And he's unable to do something for himself. That's you. You're unable to do something for yourself. You would think that after being there a period of time, he's waiting for a ripple to... they believe that the water, that it would have life in it, healing life, and the first person to fall in it when a ripple would take place would be healed. And you would think that after being there for the length of time that he was, that he would have been able to have been the first person to be healed. But Jesus approaches him and says, do you really want to be healed? Do you really want to shake this thing from you? Do you really want to move beyond that? But the good thing is, Jesus came to him. Jesus showed himself to this person. In the midst of his inability, Jesus reveals himself to the weakness, to the weak person. To the weak person, Jesus shows up to. And we see that again this week. You can take your Bible and look at Judges chapter 6. Like we said, spoke about last week, all of history is divided at one event, at one time frame, on the timeline. You see the division of history. The most spectacular event that divides history is the birth of Christ. Even though modern teaching and even though modern scholars want to take Christ out of the BC, before Christ, they want to call it the BCE or the CE, before Common Era, and the Common Era, even though they want to label it that way now, they still use the date of the birth of Christ as the separation of the time. So it's all about the birth of Christ. Even when man tries to remove or change the name of it, it is still the most earth-shattering and shocking and transforming event that has ever happened here on this planet, that has ever happened in all of creation, for Christ to come as man, for God to come as man and do something for those that couldn't do something for themselves. So we talk about BC and we talk about AD. But like we said last week as well, there really is no BC. There really is no time before Christ. He's always been present. The Son, the second of the Trinity, has always been. There's not a time when He nor the Godhead has not been. So we saw that. We saw that there was no time before Christ, but there was a before Bethlehem. So where was Christ before Bethlehem? We saw Him in the Old Testament last week. We saw Him, He reveals Himself. He's the pre-incarnate Christ. He comes in the Old Testament at different times. David saw Him, and he had a drawn sword in his hand. Daniel saw Him in Daniel chapter 7. Moses sees Him in Exodus chapter 3. But the first time He appeared as this individual, the pre-incarnate Christ, as most theologians or scholars would say, as this angel of the Lord, the capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, that angel, we saw that last week, who He appeared to, the person that He appeared to was the wrong color. The person that he appeared to was of the wrong social group. As a matter of fact, she was female, and she was a slave. She was a daughter of Ham. She was an Egyptian. Everything about the person that Jesus first reveals himself to in the Old Testament is wrong. She's not a king. She's not an emperor. She's not in charge of anything. She has nothing. She's not a Caesar. She's nobody great. She has no value. She's worth nothing. But that's who Jesus chooses to show himself to the very first time. And I told you, the first time you see a person, an individual displayed in Scripture, you need to take note of what they're doing, because it says a lot about their character. It gives you great insight into the background of who that person is and what they're doing. So the person, the female, the lady that Christ first showed up to was an unwanted individual, and it was Hagar. Hagar, who first sees this pre-incarnate, who first has this experience with Jesus. It's interesting that he comes to somebody that is every bit of her is wrong. Is wrong. But this time we're in Judges 6. He's appeared to he's already appeared at two other instances in Judges by this time, but he has appeared to groups of people before. But now he's going to come in Judges chapter 6. This time he's going to appear to a single, lonely, lowly, again, a person who sees theirself as being unworthy, a person who feels like there is no value in them. He's going to appear to a weak man. This man is timid, and he is a fearful man. His name is Gideon. He comes to Gideon as Gideon is in fear. He comes to us when we are in fear. And you say, well, I don't fear anything. You sit out there and you say, well, I have no fear in my life. So you're saying nothing. You're strong enough that you can take on anything. I don't like crickets. I have a phobia of crickets. Anybody else not like crickets? It's probably a rare phobia. I might be able to file for disability on crickets. I'll look into that. A cricket is a long story, but I have a fear of crickets. Maybe some of you don't like snakes. You say, well, I'm fearful of snakes. Some of you say, well, I don't care for snakes. They don't bother me at all. You fear one thing or the other. You think that's fear. But I'm talking about you being limitless. You feeling limitations about yourself when I say fear. I'm not talking about you being afraid of a cricket, a spider, or a snake, or the alarm clock. But we all have limitations. There are things we cannot do on our own ability. We have shortcuts. So as I was saying, if you say you sit out there and you have no fear in your life whatsoever, you do have a limitation in your life, whether you want to admit it or not. And if you don't admit it, then God needs to reveal that to you. You need to pray for God to show me where I have these limitations. Show me where I need to surrender part of my life to you. Show me where I can be more like you, how I can be modeled and molded into a better image to be more like you. So we're going to see the pre-incarnate come here. We need him to come into our life. We need him to display the same strength that he displays and gives to Gideon. So when we have limits in our life, who do we need to come and give us the strength? We need Jesus to help us rise above our limits, not necessarily our phobias, but our limits, and overcome them. Now, Gideon and the camp, they're limited, and they have a fear of something as well. but the fear rules their life. Fears in our life tend to rule us. The things where we are weak in, where we have limitations, they begin to rule and take over our life and dominate our life as well. And that's not a good thing. It's not a thing for Christ will overcome it for you. Verse 11, chapter 6, verse 11. Here he is. Then the angel of the Lord, all capital. So we believe this to be the pre-incarnate Christ. Pre-incarnate meaning before Christ, revealing himself before he came in the manger, before he came as man. He is displaying himself here once again in the Old Testament. Where was Christ before Bethlehem? He's already doing ministry. He's in the work of meeting people's needs. He's in the work, in the business of doing, of giving, of helping people already. And the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. So the angel of the Lord comes and he sits under this oak tree. Now there's a lot about this oak tree that you might look up on your own, but the oak tree has significance in other worship religions, So it's interesting that the angel of the Lord comes to sit under something that is used possibly in worship to other gods. So he comes, the angel of the Lord is sitting there and he's watches Gideon. It doesn't say how long he has been sitting there. It just says he's sitting there watching Gideon. It doesn't even say if Gideon even noticed him. How long did it take Gideon to even pay attention? Has this guy become so depressed, has he become so downtrodden that he doesn't even know that Jesus himself is sitting there ready to assist him, ready to help him? I don't have to draw too many parallels here for you. How long have you been downcast in your own life, and yet Jesus Christ has been sitting there for a long time ready to deliver you? So just because I don't draw that out of every sentence and show you what applies to you, I'm leaving that with you so that you can insert yourself into this, so that you can see your need also. So Gideon, doesn't even say Gideon has noticed him or how long he's been there, but we'll assume he's been there for a little while. He's been watching Gideon. But Gideon hasn't lifted his head to see that help is there, to see that a deliverer is there. So watch what takes place as this angel of the Lord is watching. Gideon is down in this hole thrashing wheat. Now, I've never done that. I don't know what that means. I didn't look up a YouTube video. I didn't even Google really thrashing of wheat. But I've heard about it. You've been in a church setting. You've heard about the thrashing of wheat. You've kind of heard about the process before. But everything that everybody's ever mentioned about it or said about it, you don't thrash wheat down in a hole. You don't get down in a hole to thrash wheat. The best place to thrash wheat would be an elevated place. It'd be an elevated flat place where there can be some wind to come by and pick up that, what the husk or the shaft or whatever that is, and let the wheat kernel fall to the ground. Blow the unneeded portion away, but let the real produce, or let the real wheat fall back to the ground. But yet Gideon finds himself, he's in a hole that maybe he's dug for himself. He's placed himself in a hole where there is no wind. So how hard do you think Gideon is having to work down in this hole because of his fear, because of his limitations, because he won't even look up and see that the deliverer is already there? Gideon is having to use a whole lot of energy down in this hole, doing it all himself. And he's probably getting really nothing done. But he's there because of fear. Now, how long? You say, well, maybe Gideon's just been in there for a couple of days. It's just been a short time that Gideon's been in this place. And he'll probably pick himself up. You know, like they say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, shake the dust off, go on, pick yourself up, go do something. You know, fix yourself. Fix yourself. So surely Gideon can fix himself in a short time. Can't Gideon get this right? Can't Gideon solve this fear? Can't Gideon overcome this limitation, this fear in his life? Well, look at verse 1. How long's Gideon been in there? The sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian 7 years. So Gideon's been in this pit for 7 years. He's been in this predicament. He's been in this shape. Been in this shape for 7 years. He's not able to get out of it on his own. See, what would happen is the Midianites, it says, gave them over to the hands of Midian for 7 years. The Midianites, what they would do is they would come into this land. They would come into the land that the Jews were in right here, and they would take all the livestock, they would take all the grain, they would take all the wheat, the barley, all the produce that they had. They would take it and they would kill a few people on their way out just for good measure. And they would leave until next harvest time. But when the next harvest time came around, the Midianites come storming in again and just steal it all from them. Take it from them. The Midianites didn't work for it. They didn't labor for it. They didn't do anything to earn or make what the land had produced. They didn't help raise the livestock or the cattle or the herds. But yet they come in, they wipe it out. And then they would kill a few of the people as well. So they did this year after year, and they've been doing this for 7 years, it appears. And the Jews were finding it difficult to live, difficult to sustain life. So they've got this fear. So it appears Midian's down in this pit, hoping that nobody will see him, what he's doing, in case they come in a day early. In case they come in a little early, Gideon can sneak away. He can get some of his stuff done to maybe help his family. So Gideon, there's a problem. Gideon's been in this situation so long, he's adapted his life to his limitation. Gideon has been in this boat for so long, he's adapted life to his fear. He has allowed fear, he's allowed his limitation to rule, to dictate his life. He's living with it. He's allowing fear to live in him, in his house, in the land. How long have you allowed something to take up residence in your spiritual body, in your body? How long have you allowed something to take up residence around you that should be evicted? You need me to speak up first? I can give you some examples myself. Again, you don't have to search very hard. Are there some things in your life that need to be evicted? How long has the angel of the Lord been sitting there watching you stumble through life? How long have you been stumbling? Been stumbling for a while? Been stumbling in your own ability. A lot of the people, the whole country, the whole nation had adapted their life to live in this fear and, again, the limitation. So the thing was, Gideon is down in this hole. He's focused on this hole. He's looking downward, looking at his own situation, looking at his own problem that he's in, not looking that the Lord is ready to deliver them. See, Gideon's worried, am I going to have enough wheat? Am I going to have enough barley? Am I going to have enough to sustain me here to make food, because these Midianites are going to come in and steal it all from us? Gideon is so focused. Probably all of them were so focused on this time on their own little cubbyhole, their own little dwelling. Do you know where they live? They live in like the breadbasket of the Middle East, that area. That area right there produces a lot of grain. So much so that they're able to export it. They're able to make money, lots of money off of it. Then and today as well. They have a lot of resources. They have a lot of fields. The fields were full. We're ready for the harvest, but he's only focused on his limitation. There's so much more around you. There's so much more. But you have been in a pit. You've been in a place for so long that has become normal to you when it really isn't normal. It shouldn't be the normal. You can overcome. So there's a harvest. We could apply that to ourselves. We'd apply it to a church. The harvest is ripe around any church, every church. There's a harvest. The fields are wide around your house, around the building. But sometimes we get so focused on our ability, we don't see that there's a chance to reap exactly what God has placed around even us. So Christ is watching Gideon. Watching Gideon, or probably watching me too. I could have put my name in here. Christ is watching Todd and he's shaking his head. Deliverance is here. Chance to rise above is here. Christ is watching Gideon. He's down in a hole, probably shaking his head because there was so much more for Gideon, but he lived in a pit. He was dwelling in this pit, verse 13. So Gideon says to him, we'll come back to verse 12 just a second. Then Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." So he says, if God is God, why does this happen? Why is this going on? If God is God, why is he allowing us to be attacked by these foreigners, and these foreigners come in and just devour and rule the land? He said, why is this taking place? Why is God allowing this? As a matter of fact, he uses the word abandoned. But now the Lord has abandoned us. Satan wants you to think in your pit that you are abandoned by God. No matter what that problem is, no matter what the situation, no matter what's going on, Satan wants you to think, just look down, just keep your focus down, do not lift your head up, you are abandoned by God. He wants you to continue to live in that fear, in that space, in that situation. In the pit, your judgment is clouded. Your judgment is confused, it's clouded. So Gideon says, where are these miracles? Where are all these miracles that we used to hear about? So Gideon is thinking about that. Why has God allowed these other people to overtake us? So at this point, Gideon's still in the hole. Verse 22, we finally see where Gideon gets out of the hole. We don't even know that he's looked up to see who he's talking to yet until verse 22. It seems that his head is just down. His eyesight, his vision is down, looking down to the poor situation that he's in. And then in verse 22, maybe he looks up. When Gideon saw, finally he looks up, finally he sees. When Gideon saw that he was the angel of the Lord, he said, "Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." That's when he pays attention. But at this point, he's still looking at his lack of self-worth. At this point, Gideon is still focused on how miserable his life is. Society tells us, you focus on you. That's great advice. Society says you focus on you. So let me look at society who says you focus on you. I see a lot of people screaming. I see a lot of angry people. I see a lot of mad people. Bitter people. And they're the ones who are saying focus on you. If I focus on me, am I going to look like you? We need to focus on the one who can deliver us. That'll bring some happiness. There's happiness in that. Not always screaming and being angry. That's what society... Focus on you. You'll scream and be angry like everybody else did. Verse 15. He said to him, "O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel?" Now this is how pitiful. This is how pitiful the situation that Gideon is in, that he thinks he's in. We'll go back to 14 as well. But he says, "O Lord, how am I going to deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house." Now here's the deal. Manasseh is one of the 12 tribes that came to take the promised land. But the situation is, when they came around the east side of the Jordan, 2.5 tribes said, "This is good enough. We don't have to go all the way in the promised land. Just let us stay out here on the fringe, and we'll just take the leftovers. This land looks good enough." Now, there's a whole sermon in that, just settling. God says, "I want you to go to the promised land," but 2.5 tribes said, "No, we'll just stay here." So God says, "Okay, you can stay there, but you guys got to go in and clean up this land for the others." So that's where Gideon is. Gideon's a part of a half tribe. 2.5 tribes have stayed to the east side of the Jordan when the others go to take the land. Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. So Gideon is from this half tribe of Manasseh. Now the problem with this half tribe of Manasseh is nobody respects them. Nobody thinks much about them. People look at them and say, "You guys are a little weird. What's up with you guys? How come you're a divided tribe?" That's what they're thinking about this tribe right there. How come you guys are messed up? How come half of you stayed in one place and the other half come over here? So they've got a tribe that's divided, a tribe that's split, a tribe that's severed, that's not together. There's strength in numbers, there's strength when they're together, but they have allowed themselves to be separated, and because of that, you don't hear much about this tribe. You don't hear anything. There's no leaders that come from there. You don't hear about a big legacy that comes from this tribe. You really don't hear anything. They're insignificant. They are an insignificant tribe. So Gideon says that about himself. He says, "Look," he says, "how am I going to deliver Israel? My family is the least in the least tribe." He says, "I'm from this messed up tribe. We're all jacked up. We're messed up. You got a family that's jacked up. You got a family that's messed up. You think you're insignificant. You think you're worthless. How can anything ever good come from us?" Well, that's where Gideon's at. Gideon's at, "Look," he says, "my tribe is messed up. I come from this pitiful tribe. My family is the least in this pitiful tribe." So he says, "I got a pitiful family." He says, "Not only that, but I'm the youngest in this pitiful family from this pitiful tribe. How in the world am I going to deliver anybody?" See, we feel insignificant. We do. We feel that at times. You're little. You feel you're little. You don't matter. So you don't do anything. Since I don't matter to anything, I don't matter about anything, I'm not good at anything, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just not going to do it. But that's who Jesus comes to. All of that to say, look who Jesus reveals himself to. Jesus comes to the littlest and the least of these. So if you feel little, if you feel least, if you feel unworthy, if you feel unvaluable, you feel nothing good comes from you, you don't feel like Jesus would reach out of you, who has he displayed himself to for the last 2 weeks? He's displayed himself to the littlest and the least and the unwanted, the unvalued people, the unseen people. Both of them, Hagar and Gideon, both unseen. Unseen. Not much love to go around. That's who Jesus shows up to. Jesus shows up to the weak. So that's the ministry. We see the ministry of Jesus. So we usually wallow in our failure, but that is when Jesus shows up. That is often who Jesus shows up to. Those who are in a position of failure. Like I said, the lame man at the pool, position of failure. Can't heal himself. Couldn't do it. Who shows up? Jesus shows up to him. The adulterous woman. Who showed up? Her accusers showed up. Oh, they wanted to accuse her. Who else shows up to the adulterous woman? She would be weak, right? She couldn't help herself, right? Jesus shows up to help those who can't help themselves. Who else does Jesus show up? Cheats, liars. Matter of fact, he says, "Come join my team. You come join my team. You come be with me." Who else does Jesus show up to? Jesus shows up to the disciples even after they're disciples because they're failures at fishing. They never catch anything till Jesus shows up. That's who Jesus shows up to. Jesus shows up to the weak, to the needy. Verse 12. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." Okay, now this last three words right there, "O valiant warrior." Does that sound like Gideon? I'd say that's not Gideon's. That's not going to be a name that he's going to put over his door. He's not going to put on the outside of his door, say, "I'm Gideon, the valiant warrior." It's not going to be a title that was given to Gideon. But faith in the pre-incarnate Lord will give him what he needs. The same thing is true for you. Faith in Jesus Christ, not your own ability, is where you need to put your hope and trust in. Faith in the Lord, not your ability. It's not what is in you, but who is in you, and that's what we see here. Verse 14. The Lord looked at him and said, "Go in this your strength and deliver Israel from the land of Midian. Have I not sent you?" Now Gideon didn't have any strength. He's in a hole. Gideon's weak. The strength came from the one who is with him. The strength is going to come from the one who sends him. Christ is giving him this commission, so he is giving him the strength. God calls him to service. He equips him. He gives him the ability to do this. What is God calling you to? Is God calling you to anything? If he's calling you to something, it's time to step up to the calling. Your calling may be salvation. Your calling may be service in his kingdom, in the Father's kingdom. So Christ, God, gives the ability. He's called, verse 16. But the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." Now, verse 5, you don't have to go back there. You can look at it if you want to. But verse 5 says there were so many Midianites that they were like locusts when they come to swarm the pillage the land, when they come to steal everything. It looked like the ground was just breathing. It looked like the ground was just moving. Like it was just so many of them. The ground just moved with it. But God says, he says, when you trust me, I will accomplish through you what I want done. So how's Gideon going to fight this army of Midianites that are as plentiful as locusts in a plague? Gideon's going to need a big army, isn't he? 300 men. Well, they got some high-tech weaponry. Surely they got some good weaponry. The invention of the gun was founded by Gideon. Did you know that? Well, it wasn't. I just lied. I lied to you about that. What's Gideon going to take into battle? Gideon's going to take a torch, a pitcher, and a horn. That's all they're taking into battle. 300 men go against this big army of Midianites. But when you obey the Lord, he will conquer. For Midian in them, it was the fear, the limitation. When you obey God, when God calls you to a change, when you obey, transformation happens. Things happen. What makes the difference in Gideon's life? We're almost done. Verse 18. Here's what the difference is. What thing changed in Gideon's? How can I make a difference so I can get out of this hole? How can I make a difference so I can get out of this weakness? Gideon says, "Please do not depart from here until I come back to you and bring out my offering and lay it before you." And he said, "I will remain until you return." So the first thing that Gideon says, here's his first change. He says, "Don't depart from me." He longed for Jesus. He knew I'm in the presence of something here. There's something here. Now, I know we haven't got to 22 yet, but anyway, but he says, there's something different here. He longed to be in the presence. Do you long to be in the presence of Jesus? Do you long for Jesus, or do you bail out on him at every available opportunity? Do you only seek a convenient Jesus? So Gideon longs for him to stay, and he wants to worship him. That's what he's doing with the offering. Gideon longs to be in the presence of this angel of the Lord, pre-incarnate Lord, and he also wants to give an offering. He wants to worship him. See, angels wouldn't allow people to worship them. So this angel is different. We can tell this angel is different. Gideon, who has nothing because they've been stealing it for 7 years. He says, I'm going to find, I've got something. Surely there's something I can bring to offer you who is worthy. Offer you who is going to get me out of this hole. Offer you who sees beyond my limits. See, he wants to worship. Gideon longs to be in the presence of this individual, and he longs to worship. So how did Gideon change? His heart changed. He longed to be in the presence of the Lord, and he longed to worship. He longed to give back. How can I give back? In the longing and worshiping of a Savior, life changes. Your life does not have to stay the same. If you're downcast, if your focus is on your pit, if your focus is on your predicament, your situation, life has ravaged you, life has left you feeling worthless, life has robbed you, life has stolen something from you, Jesus may just be sitting right beside you. Matter of fact, I know He is. I know He's here. I know He's sitting right beside you. Will you look to Him in your limits, in your weakness, in your inability? Gideon's own strength was useless, but with the power of Jesus, he was a conqueror. Your own strength is useless. Will you admit you are weak and you need the power of Jesus to conquer your fear, to conquer your limitations, the limitations, shortcomings of your life, and you have them daily. I'm sure of it. Amen. I want to ask you to stand and bow your head.